Call it what you want, but this was a legitimate military target. This isn't some apartment block just full of civilians. This isn't some hospital that's being used to treat cancer patients. This isn't some school where lessons are being held. And this isn't some church where they're holding Sunday service. This is a bridge being used to transport weapons of war that will be used against Ukrainian civilians in the Ukrainian countryside. Boys, it's time to talk about this, okay? It actually happened. The Ukrainians, against all odds, were actually able to take out the bridge. It's incredible. I mean, if they took out one bridge completely, caved it in, it's going to take a while for them to fix that. They damaged the railroad. We don't know how damaged it is. We don't know how long it's going to be until they have that up and running. And one bridge is still functional and just slightly damaged, right? I've seen conflicting reports about how damaged the railroad is. Of course, the Russians are saying it's not that damaged at all. The Russians claim that this was done by a guy carrying a bunch of fertilizer. There was a lot of theories floating around around exactly how this happened. Some theories included long-range missiles provided to Ukraine by the United States without people knowing. Other theories have been put forward that there was a boat that went under the bridge and exploded, like it was like a drone boat. Other theories include like special operation forces of the Ukrainian military taking out the bridge. It's hard to really know. And we probably won't know exactly what specifically happened unless you turn into the Dylan Burns TV stream, because I actually do have footage leading up to the strike from an angle not before seen that has been provided to me by somebody in occupied Crimea. Let me play the tape. Another strategic cigarette attack. Mass tragedy. Terrible. Don't smoke. Smoking's bad. Another victim to smoking. Absolute tragedy. Absolute tragedy. So, what do I think of this? Well, first off, it's incredible that that Ukraine was able to carry this out at all. It's just a coincidence that I left Ukraine the same day that this occurred. Complete coincidence. And this will undermine Russian logistics in the south. Obviously, one of the bridges have completely collapsed, so they're not going to be able to transport goods, military goods, through that bridge. You're not going to be able to transport troops through that bridge. One of the bridges are still good, but the big thing that I'm interested in is how damaged is that rail line? Because that rail line is one of the most integral parts of Russian logistical transport into Crimea. Now, right now, that rail line is disabled. The Russian government said they'd have it up in 24 hours. They're bluffing. How long it takes them will be how long Russian logistics are undermined. That one road is going to be out for the remainder of the war. It's going to have an effect. How much of an effect? Who knows? But that rail line is what's most important. Either way, for at least a short period of time, who knows how long, Russian logistics in the south of the country has been severely undermined. Reports say that the rail cars are sagging into the bridge. The rail is likely fucked for months. We don't know that for sure, right? We do not know that for sure. Either way, I want everybody to put their hands up, everybody watching at home, and I want you to like spirit ball, like give your energy to those train cars, so hopefully they collapse in on the bridge and destroy it, okay? Give your energy to the waves of the ocean, so they hopefully collapse the rest of the bridge, taking it down and sinking it so it can have a nice nap with its buddy the Moskva, okay? Everybody give all of your energy to the ocean. So, all I can say is I'm very impressed with the fact that the Ukrainian military could conduct this operation. It was a huge surprise to me. You know what it was? A good friend of mine that I was staying with in Ukraine actually came up to me while it was like probably 7, maybe, no, it was probably 8 a.m. Ukraine time, 7 or 8 a.m. Ukraine time, the day of. He comes in. He has this massive shit-eating grin on his face that I know he only has when he has on his face when he wants to tell me something. And I'm like, "What's up?" And he's like, "Did you check out the news?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? What news?" He's like, just check out the news. So I opened Twitter because I thought it would be on Twitter, and boom, immediately, there it is. He took it out. And I was shocked. I actually have a video where I recorded my initial reactions. I didn't end up uploading it because we didn't have a lot of information at the time. So I would have just been posting it just for clicks, not for substantive review. I didn't want to do that. But it was a real shock because this was something that the Russians bragged about being impossible. They bragged that this would be impossible. They actually uploaded graphics on the internet showing how many defenses this bridge had, including military dolphins, by the way. The graphic that they uploaded included 70 different layers of defense that the bridge had, including military Russian dolphins, Russian military dolphins. And so the fact that the Ukrainian, either special forces or however they took this out, were able to conduct this operation is quite impressive. And no matter how long it's going to undermine Russian logistics, this is a massive blow to Russian morale. This is a massive blow to the image of Russia and the Russian military. This is going to make a lot of people in Moscow ask questions about how something like this can happen. A lot of Russians are going to ask questions about how something like this can happen. And it's going to undermine Russian logistics for how long, who knows, but possibly for a decent amount of time. Possibly for a very decent amount of time. And this is all while Ukraine is conducting counteroffensive operations in Kherson, an area of the country across the Dnieper that already has a million logistical issues where they can't get enough food to the troops, they can't get enough ammunition to the troops, they can't get heavy equipment over the bridges because the bridges have been damaged too much, and the logistics of those troops are just severely compromised, and now they're going to be compromised even further. And there was already that report from the New York Times that it's actually Putin keeping Russian troops in the city of Kherson across the Dnieper River in this just frankly untenable position against the advice of his generals. That's going to only make the situation much worse for them. Better for us, much worse for them, as well as worse for the rest of the southern Russian occupied territories. So, now that they've got that out of the way, greetings from Germany, Dylan. You're doing a great job. Thank you, Seattle One. I appreciate that. Now that they got that out of the way, I want to talk about the response to this. So, the main response to this has been stuff like this. This is the worst day of the war, worst day of the war so far. It's mostly been people joking, memeing, playing around, having fun. I saw this video going around, which seems pretty fun. Let's see if I can bring it up. Kerch Bridge is on fire. Look at this. You know, people having fun, but there's certain people who have had a different response. Namely, first I want to talk about, actually, you know, I think I should start with the Americans. I don't think I should start with the British, with the Russian commentators and the Russian state TV, because we always talk about Russian state TV. Let's talk about the online commentators who have had a thing or two to say. Right? They've had a thing or two to say. Look at this one. This is from Rob Rousseau. Just checked the history books, and fortunately, cheering on terrorism when it's against the Russians has never come back to haunt us at any point in the past, so I think we are in the clear. He isn't the only person saying that. Somebody else had a few comments to say, like Michael Tracy. He's been posting about it for like 3 days now, just nonstop posting about it. Him saying, somebody was saying a bridge is not civilian. This isn't civilian territory. This is a bridge being used to transport military supplies. And he responds, A building like the World Trade Center is not a civilian either. Okay. So there were a lot of posts like this. I think Alex Rubinstein, I forget his name, he also said something similar to this. And I posted one thing in response. Well, I posted, okay, I'm going to be honest. I kind of co-posted a little bit for a while, right? But the main point I want to get across is this, right? And I posted this on Twitter, got a little bit of traction. This is what the bridge was being used for by the Russian army. They were using it to transport guns, transport ammunition, transport military vehicles like trucks and artillery pieces and rocket launchers and artillery guns and tanks over through Crimea, over the bridge, then into Kherson to be used in battles against Ukraine. Those guns would end up firing upon Ukrainian villages up and down the front line, many of which, I presume, would end up ending Ukrainian civilian lives due to the indiscriminate policy Russia has towards artillery strikes. In fact, just 48 hours after the bridge was taken out, I think it was like over 10 civilians were actually killed in the city of Zaporozhye. I think the number has like risen to like 17 or something. We're going to be possibly watching this. We might watch a piece on it quickly. It was like a large amount of civilians died in a strike in Zaporozhye because this is the policy Russia has been using. This bridge was being used for military purposes. Call it what you want, but this was a legitimate military target. This isn't some apartment block just full of civilians. This isn't some hospital that's being used to treat cancer patients. This isn't some school where lessons are being held. And this isn't some church where they're holding Sunday service. This is a bridge being used to transport weapons of war that will be used against Ukrainian civilians in the Ukrainian countryside. This is 100% a legitimate target since it supports Russian logistical capabilities when it comes to their military. Now, 3 civilians did die in the explosion. A tragedy. Absolutely awful. It shouldn't have happened. I wish they didn't die. But that does not remove from the fact that this is being used to support the war effort, this bridge, therefore making it a legitimate military target. Blowing up a bridge, just because on occasion it is used by civilians or often used by civilians, does not make it terrorism because you took out a bridge. Terrorism has a lot of definitions. Many people, including myself, think the word is used very flippantly, basically making it almost meaningless at times. But under no definition of terrorism is it when a civilian dies. That would be a ridiculous definition of terrorism. Because if that's the definition of terrorism that we're using, then basically every single military conflict, every single war, every single any type of battle is terrorism. Because in every single battle, every single war, civilians die. I think if we're going to respect terrorism as a word and not just say this word has become meaningless due to its use in pop culture and due to the fact that it's mostly used by non-governmental actors, used towards non-governmental actors, therefore giving breathing space to governmental actors who commit the same acts of brutality like the Tatmadaw in Myanmar or the Moroccan government in Western Sahara or the Israeli government in Palestine or the American government in Vietnam or the Russian government in Ukraine, yada yada, you get the point. But none of these definitions is going to include when a civilian dies. If you deliberately target civilians with the intent of instilling terror, that is a definition of terrorism that I think holds the most respectability. And I have no reason to believe that this strike on this bridge was meant to kill civilians, to just scare the civilian population. Be like, boo, boo, we will kill civilians, we will murder you. That was not what it was getting across. What this was meant to do was slap the face of the Russian government and try to undermine their logistics. It is 100% a legitimate military target. Unlike the apartment block that was destroyed in Zaporozhye less than 24 to 48 hours later, where much more civilian died. I think it was like 400 or 500% more civilian died in that strike than in this strike. Yet a lot more people seem to care of a certain stripe on the internet about this bridge strike and the civilians that died here than the much more civilians who died in the apartment strike, or the much more civilians that have died on the Ukrainian side for the vast majority of the war. It's 20 civilians now? Jesus Christ. I love Zaporozhye. It's a beautiful city, man. They just hit another apartment complex tonight. That's the thing. That's the thing. Like this, for all intents and purposes, is terrible. What happened to those civilians? But why is it that everybody is angry, particularly about this, even though it is very easy to make the argument that this is a legitimate military target, but then we point to a apartment block torn down on the Ukrainian side, demolished on the Ukrainian side by Russian missiles. No argument you could make that that was a legitimate military target. You're not going to hear a peep from Rob. You're not going to hear a peep from Alex Rubinstein. You're not going to hear a peep from Michael Tracy. Why? Why? Because they just frankly don't care as much. It's not what they care about. And hey, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, we all care about different things. You know, there's a million different geopolitical issues. I don't talk about the Ethiopian wars going on right now. I don't talk about what's going on over there. Does that make it any less important? No. No, it doesn't. But I guess the difference when it comes to this is this isn't like, oh, well, you're not talking about the conflict in Central Africa. So when it's all forward, this is like connected here. This is like right in the same war. It's not even like that far removed. It's like 24 hours later. Yet this is getting more outrage from these individuals of a certain political stripe online than the 20 civilians who die in a very clearly civilian target. Not like this bridge. This bridge can clearly be shown to be being used for military purposes. That apartment block, that was being used to host barbecues and birthday parties. It's not the same, man. It's just not the same. I believe it's quite simple, really. Obviously, you're going to think this is terrorism if the word isn't being used to describe what is being done, but because of who is doing it. You know, type of thing you get to if you're far-right loon. I think they just was like, this is a bridge. People who are civilians died. Bridge be used by civilians. Civilians died, therefore terrorism. But then, like, if that's the definition, then, like, doesn't that mean every military and every paramilitary organization on the planet is a terrorist organization? And if you want to say, well, that's how we show that the word terrorism has no meaning, I'm sympathetic to that argument. But you can't argue to me that this, if you're trying to treat the word terrorism seriously, that this is terrorism. Like, come on. Like, it's no question why this was being targeted. Why were the Russians fighting so hard to protect this bridge if it was for civilian purposes? Why would the Ukrainian military want to specifically target this bridge in particular? Any military strategist will tell you it supports Russian logistics in the south. Anyway, that's enough of this. I just wanted to quickly hit on that talking point. Now I can get to the Russian response to this. There have been a lot of Russian responses. This person here is complaining that their favorite vacation spot in Crimea they can't go to anymore, and they loved vacationing there. Can't bring myself to say good morning. It's a terrible morning. Just yesterday, I was going to Sevastopol, and the admired Tudorina, whatever. How huge it is, how awesome it is, how awesome it is driving there. How they built a bunch of bridges, constructions. Really awesome. Wow. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? I was just thinking about how they built all these constructions that were used to support artillery shells that were then fired at civilians. And like, where's the moral outrage at the 20 dead civilians in Zaporozhye? Where's the moral outrage at all the dozens more of civilians who died on the Ukrainian side? I just don't see it. I just don't see it because they're picking and choosing what they're angry about. They're just picking and choosing. And like, I'm supposed to care because you can't go on vacation? Fuck you. Why should I care? You shouldn't be vacationing in occupied territory anyway. Here's Michael Tracy, still coping, still seething. For those still confused, the military capabilities of the bridge were not meaningfully damaged or impeded. Hence, the message-sending nature of the attack, which deliberately killed civilians. This is the basic essence of terror bombing. This fucking moron. Okay, number one, this is not the best source for whether or not the bridge is going to be operating at full capacity now or not. That's the first thing. Two, just because, let's say the attack was unsuccessful and they didn't disable it, that doesn't mean that the intent of it was to intimidate civilians and do a terror bombing. It could mean that they were trying to disable the bridge and they disabled one bridge but wasn't able to disable the rail line for more than a few days or who knows how long. So this doesn't prove that it was a terror bombing or a terror attack of any stripe. This would be like if I try to attack a Russian military position and I miss. That doesn't make it a terror bombing because I wanted to send the message that I could blow people up. God, man. Next one. This is Russian state television, where a Russian host says that the events in Crimea call for an escalation. He demands that the New Year's celebrations be canceled. Instead of Christmas trees, lights, and decorations, he says money should be spent on wintered uniforms for the troops. Oh my God. Sorry, Billy. We can't get you that new toy truck you wanted this year. We had to get Ivan a new pair of socks so he can go fill up more mass graves in Ukraine. It's truly for the best. Don't worry, we signed them in your name. My goodness, man, my goodness. By the way, can I just say that Dmitry Medvedev, the former president of the Russian Federation and one of Putin's right-hand men, actually said that if the Crimean Bridge was targeted a while ago, he said this, that it would be a cause for nuclear war. And he hasn't said shit since the attack. Almost like he's full of hot air. Anyway, let's start this Russian state TV segment. Do we need a loud and festive, beautiful celebration of the New Year 2023 the way we're accustomed to? Or will we have to abstain? Perhaps this money could be sent to the front and spent to buy winter uniforms and thermal scopes, or buy Mavic drones from China on the down low. Maybe that would be better. I think so. Let me say for myself, and let everyone answer for himself too. Do you need a beautiful, festive Christmas tree in the main square of your city? It costs at least several million rubles. Do you need garlands that cost tens of millions? Will you need those in December of 2022? From the start of the special military, can I just say, when you've got hundreds of thousands of people fleeing your country to get away from the draft. I find it hard to believe you're going to be able to get that much money from people not buying Christmas trees and presents for their children so they can buy socks for the soldiers, because your government is so unbelievably corrupt that you guys just lost, and this is real, by the way, lost 1.5 million winter uniforms. And why would we believe that if all these people donated their Christmas basically to the Russian military, that money wouldn't also be lost in the hands of some corrupt official? From the start of the special military operation, federal TV channels got rid of the entertainment content. They did away with almost all of it. They're delivering non-stop news broadcasting. Isn't that normal? Da. Mayors of certain Russian cities officially said, we won't send municipal budgets on debauchery known as the New Year's. In the situation where war is ongoing, when Russia is sending 300,000 mobilized men to war, taken out of their normal, peaceful lives. To put it mildly, this is no time to celebrate. Not the time for that. Naturally, St. Petersburg was getting ready to have a festive new year, but they halted that. People understood it's not the right time, it stopped. We should say, well done. Would be nice if the rest of the cities, at least the cities with 1 million or more residents, would formulate their position by Monday. Can I just say that this is how you destroy a nation's morale? Just cancel Christmas. By federal decree, we have canceled Christmas. We've mobilized the men. Our economy is in the shitter. A ton of your husbands and sons are coming home in coffins. By the way, just on top of that, we've canceled Christmas. Give me your Christmas present so I can give it to the soldiers instead. Hey, can I just say, in Russia, it is the conservatives fighting the war on Christmas. Isn't that something? Yeah, this is really going to keep Russian morale up. At this point, the war is moving into the new stage. It doesn't matter what it is called in the legal sense, a war, a special military operation, a counterterrorism operation, it doesn't matter at all. I understand what the legal consequences would be. I understand that this war would be officially called a war, won't be officially called a war, but if you're waging this war, you do it until victory. And therefore, you give your all towards that outcome. And all the resources that you have. Secondly, you realize that the entire nation wages war. Not only the army, not only the defense ministry, not only the general staff, but the entire country, all of our 155 million people, minus those who have left or are currently in hiding from the draft, are waging war, taking part in war, because somebody already sent off their loved ones to the military enlistment office, having given the most precarious thing they have, and someone else is waiting their turn. This means that all of us, not just these people, not just this country, but all of us, should be talked to in a different way. Properly, the way you should talk to people. Using normal human words, instead of sending out General Gorminkin, head of the army's political directorate. God forgive me, I don't think such a directorate exists. Directorate existed. He says, we have everything, enough of everything. There is no need to cancel New Year's celebrations, especially to help the soldiers. They have everything. The thing that's interesting, and I do want to talk about this briefly, and I guess this would be the point to mention this, right? I was in Turkey, once again, from a chatter. I was in Turkey last week. Russians there were panicked. I heard a lady talking to the draft board. Leave him alone. He is abroad. He is not coming back. Some people were desperately searching for cheap accommodations to stay. Not that surprising. But I do want to, and we're hearing stories like that across the board right now. I do want to briefly mention that for the first time in a long time, we are seeing direct criticism of the government. We're seeing a little bit of it right here, by the way. We've also seen it from other state television commentators, of course, military bloggers, Telegram channels, etc., towards the defense ministry. A lot of Wagner-affiliated groups attacking the defense ministry. A lot of military bloggers attacking the defense ministry. Some of it is for the missing winter uniforms. Some of it is for the failed mobilization. Some of it is for the attack on the Crimean Bridge. Some of it is for the loss in the Battle of Kharkiv. Some of it is for what's going on in Kherson. Some of it is for, just how badly the mobilization is going. All across the board. All across the board. But a lot of this criticism seems to be directed towards a specific person, and that specific person is Shoigu, the defense minister, an ally of Vladimir Putin. And the government seems to has largely been allowing this to happen. The criticisms on Telegram, the criticisms on Russian state media, the criticisms on across the board towards Shoigu, the defense minister, almost like the Russian government acknowledges that there needs to be a pressure release valve for all of these failures, and they've decided, for at least the momentarily, we'll allow our our fall guy to be Defense Minister Shoigu, so it doesn't have to be Putin, or it doesn't have to be Kadyrov. In fact, Kadyrov directly criticized Shoigu. There was even a call from a few people for Shoigu to literally kill himself, and Kadyrov got a promotion. He was made a colonel, general or something. I think it's a matter of time until Shoigu is ousted, but I think Shoigu, in at least the near future, I don't know if he's going to be killed or anything, for the near future, he's going to stay in his position, because as long as the Russians are getting battered, until mobilization has gone on a little bit more, and they can shift to a new defense minister, they want to have a fall guy. And I think Shoigu is going to be that fall guy. But don't worry, this doesn't mean that the Russian government is allowing all criticisms. There was a Wagner-affiliated Telegram channel, Russian Telegram channel, military blogger types, that was criticizing Dmitry Peskov, the press secretary of the Kremlin, and Sergei Lavrov, our favorite little Russian goblin. And that person actually had their, I don't know if it was their home raided, but they got arrested. I think I saw some film of it. They got arrested. I think it was next to their car. So it seems that the Russian government has kind of outlined what they see are acceptable criticisms, while also drawing a line in the sand that you will not attack the rest of Putin's inner circle. You will not attack Sergei Lavrov. You will not attack Peskov, and you certainly will not attack Vladimir Putin. I'm telling you, man, Sergei Lavrov is untouchable, at least for the time being. Putin's untouchable. Peskov is untouchable. Shoigu, though, he seems to be the fall guy. I think the clock is ticking for Shoigu. Eventually, they're going to have to make the fall guy, take a fall. Whether that's going to be from his position within the Ministry of Defense or from a 20-story building, only time will tell. So says the head of the political directorate. How could this be said after the entire country for the last 7 months is collecting money, coin by coin, for those damned drones and thermal scopes? Any pensioner's grandma already knows what a thermal scope is and why it's needed. And in the 8th month, the head of the political directorate says that nothing is needed. Keep lighting your New Year's garlands. Have your corporate parties. And it's after the Supreme Commander-in-Chief said, stop lying. The Supreme told you. One second. Whoa, that went a little fast, didn't it? The Supreme told you, not the journalist, Sergei. Because really, who am I? The Supreme said so. Anyway. I think he's there was a Russian military official who said that the problem was that a line from the top to bottom. He didn't refer exactly to who was the top and who was the bottom though, and so a lot of people have seen that as a criticism. Again, Shoigu. All arrows point to Shoigu. All arrows seem to point to Shoigu. All criticisms seem to be pointed at Shoigu, and anytime it's not pointed at Shoigu, it gets pointed at someone like Peskov, and then the person is screwed. So it seems the government has chosen their fall guy. Anyway, meanwhile, on Russian state TV, they're drawing parallels between the Crimean Bridge, the warship Moskva, and Putin as Russia's main symbols. They must have forgotten their own lies about the Moskva. People are being urged to unite around Putin and march into battle when called. That's the thing. The thing that's interesting about the Moskva is not only the fact that it was terribly not maintained. It was, it sunk. It was very humiliating for the Russian government. But the government still has the line that it wasn't sunk by Ukraine. It was just a storm and an oopsie explosion. But if you go to Russian state TV, they even know that isn't going to be bought by the majority of Russians. And so they have to acknowledge, even if they won't openly say it, that Ukraine did it, and therefore call for revenge for technically what the official position is, something that Ukraine didn't even do. Very interesting. Very interesting. Can't keep your propaganda in line all the time, I guess. We need to save Christmas. True. Emu Anon, we need to go into Russia and save Christmas. If there's any nation that deserves Christmas, it is the nation covered in ice and snow. So Iceland, Greenland, and Russia. They deserve it. And Finland, of course. They understand that the Crimean Bridge has to be destroyed in order to cut off our troops. Hey, even Russian state TV understands that it's a military target. Isn't that interesting? For reliable, stable deliveries of equipment and arms. It's clear that Ukraine's advance on Kherson will follow. Hey, even he sees it, man. Wait, are you telling me that Russian state TV has a position more in line with reality than Michael Tracy? Isn't that interesting? And an attempt to split our ground troops in two. To wedge in between Zaporozhye and Enrodor. They're acting according to NATO regulations. NATO is fighting there. No one is doubting that. So again, this is the conspiracy theory that the reason why Russia is losing isn't because they lost to weak, pitiful Ukraine. That's impossible. It must be that, and this is usually the words used, that all these black, English-speaking NATO soldiers are pushing back our armies. It is not that Ukraine is powerful. It's that NATO has sent its troops in illegally. We don't have any proof of it outside of just some footage that was publicly posted by foreign volunteers. But we know it. We know it's the case. They really just cannot accept that Ukraine is just so determined not to be part of Russia that they push them back. They just can't accept that, so they have to make up fairy tales to make themselves feel better. They are NATO mercenaries. They're acting by the book. As for us, when are we going to start fighting? They already consider us a global villain, so let them see us as a villain. It's better to be feared than to be laughed at. Well, I will say Russia is mostly a laughingstock at the moment. On the other hand, many Western politicians, including Americans, God, Jesus Christ, there's some, understand what can come out of the suicidal inclination to tease the Russian bear. Here is what Trump says. And now we have a war between Russia and Ukraine. Potentially hundreds of thousands of people are dying. We must demand the immediate negotiation of a peaceful end to the war in Ukraine, or we end up with World War III. And there will be nothing left of our planet. All because stupid people didn't have a clue. They didn't have a clue. They don't really understand. I rebuilt our military. I rebuilt our nuclear power. They don't understand what they're dealing with. The power of nuclear. They have no idea what they're doing. Can I just say how unbelievably insane it is that the same president who tried to leverage military aid against Volodymyr Zelensky, against against Zelensky, okay? I'll give up on saying this first part. The same person who tried to leverage aid so he could dig up dirt on his political opponent is now actively saying, hey man, Russia's gonna end the world. We need to negotiate peace now. Even if Ukraine could win, you know, just we need to negotiate some territory away, you know? The art of the deal, man, is the big strong Trump is ready to cave. He's lost his nerve. The same man who threatened to wipe North Korea off the face of the earth all of the sudden wants to de-escalate. Isn't that interesting? Enough of drawing the red lines. It's time to part punishing in the harshest way. Those who are weak get a beating. We have to be strong and decisive. And to remember what the regulations say of the Red Army, the Soviet Army, how a soldier and a commander have to act decisively. Now, about the mainstream media. We need info hygiene. Stop showing and spreading in our country speeches addressing our troops and our nation by the Ukrainian Nazis. This should not be shown on our TV. We need the strictest military censorship, which doesn't mean the absence of quick, shut them down, shut them down. But info hygiene. We don't need to show where our troops are going, which convoys are following, where our storage depots are located, who and where is the commander. No need to show what the enemy could use to carry out their strikes. Remember when Gray Zone accidentally posted the location of a Wagner base and they ended up getting a lot of Wagner leaders killed and Wagner soldiers killed? It killed like, I don't know, it was like 30, 50 people, like a ton of Wagner soldiers, because Gray Zone wanted to post pictures of them on Telegram. Good times, man. And don't pour propaganda crap from the West into the ears of our citizens. It's time for our entire nation to come to our senses. These are serious times. The Crimean Bridge is not only a military object. Look, they're acknowledging it as a military object, though, more than Michael Tracy will, which defines logistics over supplying our troops in Crimea, as well as those in Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. It is a symbol of Russia's pride. Can I just say how hilarious it is that Western commentators like Michael Tracy are soying out more about the blowing up of the bridge than actual Russian state TV by calling it terrorism? And Russian state TV is more willing to accept the military objective of blowing up the bridge than Michael Tracy. It's very interesting. It is a symbol of Russia's pride. They're striking at symbols. From the standpoint of a logic of military actions, the warship Moskva did not present a threat. It was the flagship. What do you mean? It was a ship like many other ships that was firing on the shore. It did present a threat. Yes, it did. Whatever. It's Ukraine's ground troops. Well, the thing is, like, if you make it so the Russian government has to keep their ships further away from the shoreline because they're scared they're going to get blown up, it's going to be kind of hard to do a military landing in Odessa, which has been prevented for the entirety of the war. It didn't approach within the distance, when its artillery mounts could have been used. Its weapons were mainly anti-ship missiles. They don't get used against objects on the ground. They are striking symbols. Well, there's soldiers on there that could be used. We saw how many Russian Marines were taken from ships and deployed on the ground. So attacking these ships which are carrying soldiers, which could then be used in battles for Mariupol, for example, which did happen. They took Marines from the fleet and deployed them to fight Mariupol because they couldn't take the city without more troops because the defenders were fighting so fiercely. They were fighting for every inch. Not to mention, they could use the ship later at a later point. Take it out before it does anything to you. Yeah, I hate to say, but you know, ships are fair game in war. They are striking symbols. We should be prepared that they will continue to strike at symbols. Our main remaining symbol is our president. He is our guarantor and our foundation. Oh my God. Totally not a cult. Our common goal is to unite around our president. Imagine saying our last symbol. Our last symbol in Russia is a 70-year-old man. Brilliant. Our common goal is to unite around our president. What do they want to achieve by striking our symbols? To bring us down, like we have no power. Pardon. We do have a government in Russia. We have our president, our supreme commander, and also us. We have faith in him. And we will follow him until the end. Today, this is the only guarantee that all will be well. Because today, we've come too close to the edge. Beyond it is the cliff. Man, they keep talking about the cliff, man. They keep beating their chest. When's the cliff gonna come? I'm waiting. Let me say it again. Only together, only with our president, everyone should do their part in their place. If the motherland calls and hands a machine gun, we will take a machine gun and complete the tasks.
Burns is an
immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man. A archipelago. Thank you so much for the tier 1 and being subbed for 15 months. Glad you're staying safe. Now you can return the war zone that is woke U.S. politics. One of the first things I'm going to do in the United States is go to a Unite the Right rally in Maryland. So, yeah, I think if there's a way to welcome myself back to the American political scene, yeah, I think I found it, huh? Boy, how's it going, Soren? Why doesn't he go and take the machine gun himself? Well, the thing is, we will complete the tasks. Is there a single task that the Russians have completed in the war? Any of their original goals? A single one? They haven't secured all the Donbass. They haven't demilitarized Ukraine. They haven't changed the Ukrainian government. They didn't stop the expansion of NATO. Actually, Finland and Sweden joined, so they've already lost on that front. Like, which task did they set up to do that they actually completed?